Hello and welcome to my video on Unicorn Overlord for a game report on how to ruin a user experience. Now, let's start with what this video is. I am going to be analyzing the user experience of army building and managing the inventory. I'm going to be looking at the most basic levels of the economy, currency and what you spend it on. And I'm going to be talking about how stationing guards breaks the user experience even more. This is not a story critique, except for in the final thoughts. I'm not looking at game balance, and I'm not bashing the game. Gameplay is very good. I've put 99 hours into the game. I like it. So what is a user interface or user experience? Well, the user interface is how a user of software interacts with that software. Things like menu layouts, button sizes, font choice. Even the loading screens are part of the UI. Now, the UX, or user experience, is a more holistic look at the complete user experience when using the software. While a menu can be theoretically easy to read and use, if all the information around that menu is frustrating, then that can ruin the UX. So let's talk a little about sorting. There are many ways to sort things. There's alphabetical, the size of it, the value, weight, all kinds of different ways. And different methods of sorting have different merits. And all computerized lists have their default sorting method. Unicorn Overlord has chosen acquired sorting. So, the pros and cons of order acquired sorting, or AS. Pro, it's very easy for humans to set up acquired sorting. And it requires no maintenance for any sort of database manager, whether human or computer. And it is very easy to find the first and the latest additions to a collection. Think about a scrapbook. If you just put in every stamp as soon as you get it, it is very easy to open up the first page, look at your first stamp. And it's also very easy to open up the last page and look at the last stamp that you put in. Now, the problem with acquired sorting is that it gets hard to parse things in the middle of the collection. You need to remember when you got each stamp in relation to each other stamp. And the more items in the list, this increases difficulty exponentially. Now, when should you use acquired sorting? Well, it's very good for man-made lists or groupings of very little importance. Things like a homework collection pile or money in a wallet. It's very good for groups where when an entry was added is very important. Things like download lists or email inboxes. Now, if you check your download folders or your emails, you'll see that they usually have very convenient markers to give a time frame. Say, this is from today, this is from yesterday, this is from last week, this is from a month ago, etc. When you don't want to use acquired sorting is if you have a large collection of entrants that are irrelevant in terms of when they were added. Things like an army builder. Just a quick reminder, I like this game. I think it's really good. I put a lot of time into it. I like it. Now, building a user experience is hard. It's very hard, and this is a small team. Please don't be mean to them. I'm not trying to be. Now the question is, does it matter when an item or character is acquired? Yes, it actually does. Seeing a new addition can be very important. You just get a new sword, you want to double check its stats in your inventory. And Unicorn Overlord does this, but only on the item tab of the pause menu. There they put new items on the top of the list with a little exclamation mark to let the players know that they just acquired it. And this menu doesn't even use acquired sorting. It uses item ID, presumably so that it's easier to manage consumable items both in and out of combat. Just a quick tangent here on the items tab. It's the only unsortable item list in the game. It uses item ID and you can't change it. It also has the items listed by an opposite ID to the other menus. What would normally be on the bottom of the menu is now on the top, and what's on the top is on the bottom. It's very weird. Now let's talk about formation building. This is just not a good user experience. By default, units are always sorted by acquired sorting, and that means if there's a tie, then the units are organized by acquired sorting. So if you sort by level, for instance, the game doesn't take into account experience to level up. So if you're using a wide number of units, each level will have all the units at that level, all in a big row, not based on class or alphabetized. It's instead based on when you grab the unit, which can become very confusing because you have one elven archer on the top of the list, one in the middle, but you're looking for the werebear, but when did you grab the werebear? If you use the order by unit, that is the only way to actually see which units are already assigned to a formation. It leads to an event where, when I was building units, I had to click on every single person up the list from the bottom until eventually the game said, this unit is available to be put into a unit. And that is not a good way for a game to run. Now, this could be worse. It's not that bad to have acquired sorting. But the reality is that there are 58 characters that you can recruit before the final mission, and that a max-sized army uses 50 of them. So you have to manage an entire list of 58 people, remembering when you recruited each person. Now, handling 50 out of 58 people effectively, that's a task and a half. But it's made much worse by mercenaries. Players can just hire mercenaries to fill holes in their roster, and these mercs are treated no differently than any of the unique characters, which would be nice except for the fact that they clog up the menus even more. In the early game, I hired 3 mercenaries, and I never really used them after I got out of the beginning area of the game. So, if you want to keep menus clear for your actual characters, you want to hire as few mercenaries as possible so that they aren't blocking your way. And now let's talk about towns. After most missions in the game, you will unlock a new town to buy wares at. In fact, some missions can unlock multiple towns. And when you unlock a town, it will have some basic resource needs called deliveries. And if you fulfill those deliveries, you get a steady supply of gold and supplies. But only if you garrison a soldier to that town. And every character and mercenary can garrison one town at a time. And if they are garrisoning a town that does nothing to them in combat, it is purely for that steady supply of gold. Now, by the end of the game, I had hired 58 mercenaries to garrison every single town. That doubled my list of units that I had to sort through every time I wanted to build a unit formation. And now let's talk a little bit about rapport. Characters can gain rapport by fighting in the same unit formation. It's very similar to Fire Emblem, but with a bit of a twist in that even if a character doesn't have unique dialogue with another one, they still gain rapport. And that's very good. Even generic mercenaries can have rapport, and rapport can really increase your stats and make a unit much more effective. In the rapport tab in the pause menu, it will only show who a character has unique dialogue with, because that's what most people care about. They really want to see those unique dialogues, even if they're like 6 lines and they're not that fun to watch. You want to get that check mark. The problem is that the fastest way to gain rapport for a unit is in the tavern, which has every single character and mercenary in a huge unsortable list that uses acquired sorting. 2 lists, actually. There's one list for picking who you want to eat, and then one huge list for every single person that they have a rapport with, which is every single unit in the army. So, if in the late game I wanted to increase the rapport between one unit and another, I have to sort through 114 different characters in a list. And then, of course, you have to give them equipment. Every character has 3 or 4 equipment slots. Thankfully, the game wants you to sort by item ID. So, it's theoretically not as painful to sort through the inventory. Except, if you sort by anything other than item ID, it becomes acquired sorting, turning the inventory into a mess. And so, if you have a full army of 50 characters on the field, even if somehow you only have units with 3 slots for equipment, you would still need 150 items of various sorts to equip them. Bows, swords, axes, spears, shields, great shields, which are different from shields, and, of course, accessories. Now, the game knows this, and so it will fill your inventory up with tons of all of those equipments, just so that you never had to send a soldier out without it. And then there's side grade items. Now, a side grade is an item that isn't better or worse, just different from another item. Now, this game has many side grades for weapons. In fact, arguably, just about every weapon is a side grade from another. And from secondary bonus effects to new tactics to stat boosts, they range the entire gambit of ways that you can make a weapon a side grade. And it is very hard to build 10 formations while trying to remember who has which item that gives which abilities and who in your army actually has the stats to use them best. And is 2 damage better than an ability that does poison effect? Because now you can't use normal attack, you have to use your poison attack. And you don't necessarily who you're fighting until you're in a mission. So maybe you don't really want poison, and instead you need a fire. But then you have to remember, who did you equip the fire sword to? It becomes a mess. I would forgive anyone for not knowing that weapon upgrades are even in this game. It's an incredibly late game feature. By the time I unlocked it, I only had 3 missions left. Upgrading a weapon increases its base stat to 25, or if it is both a physical and magical weapon, one stat becomes 20 and the other becomes 10. And this makes the side grade problem even worse, since these upgrades are expensive, taking more renown than promoting a unit or recruiting a very high-end merc. Plus, they take a super rare item that takes a lot of money to acquire. So, you look at all of these items and it suffers from a serious case of choice paralysis, where some weapons have minor secondary effects, so do you want to get them or other ones? Is it worth it to upgrade your meteorite weapons, which are other late game rewards, to just get 1 more strength? Do you want to upgrade the flame sword? Oh, but be careful which flame sword you upgrade, because 1 flame sword gives you immunity to burn damage and 1 doesn't. It's a real just mess of trying to manage this huge inventory of items, sorting through everything and finding the best thing to upgrade. Thankfully, when it comes to equipping a unit, there is an optimization button. 1 click and it will quote-unquote optimize your unit. Now, if you upgrade the unit's tactics, it will set the characters to a very basic and very poorly done template. It is really bad. Like, a unit that can heal will be set to randomly heal any damaged unit whenever possible. That doesn't sound bad until you remember that it's completely random. So you have an archer who's lost 1 HP in the back line, and you have a tank who's got 3 HP left. The game weighs them as equal priorities. So your healer will just heal the archer's little boo-boo, and your tank will die, and so will the unit. If you press optimize on the item screen, it will optimize the items equipped, but it will also automatically optimize the tactics. So item optimization will always reset your tactics, so you don't really want to do it. But even worse, the item optimization is very bad. It's brain dead. It gives magic buffing items to warriors who don't have any magic attacks, and it gives critical hit modifiers to the backline support casters with no attacks. And the units that these abilities are tied to can become stronger. Some of them, just the human ones. Angels and beast people and elves are presumably at the peak of their power for some reason. So, when you enter a screen to promote a unit to a higher class, it will show you which stats increase, but that is all that it tells you. It doesn't say which item slot is added, because each one gets a new item slot. It doesn't tell you which tactics in their tactics list are new, or let you compare the new Valor skill with the old one that it's replacing. All stats for characters are given a grade from F to S, and it doesn't tell you if the grade increases during promotion. So it doesn't tell you if somehow upgrading this unit will give it a good enough guard rate to go from B to A or F to D. And, of course, all of these unpromoted mercs that you have will clog up the list. And these promotions are incredibly expensive, so all it will take is one small mistake to ruin your wallet. Well, if we're talking about wallets, we should move to currency. Let's start with the good currency, Divine Shards. Divine Shards are mostly picked up on the overworld, or they're rare finds that you get in a mining minigame, which has its own problems, but they're outside of the scope of this. And these Divine Shards can be spent on an angelic store that sells rare and powerful items. And you need to spend shards at the store to unlock the ability to purchase more goods on the higher end of the spectrum. This incentivizes players not to hoard their stones, but to, in the early game, start spending them on things useful now, because that's the only way to get the really good late game stuff. And when you unlock the store, a powerful character will offer to join you if you spend at least 30 Divine Shards at the store. And all the shops share an inventory, and they have several locations dotted all around the map. This is, I think, one of the best stores in an RPG I've seen. It's well done. It's got an amazing incentive to spend and not save. It's amazing. Now let's talk about the bad currency. Honor. So honors are a currency that is spent to make your formations hold more characters, be able to deploy more formations. It hires mercenaries, it promotes your units to higher classes, and late game, it lets you upgrade your weapons and buy hand mirrors to lightly respec characters. And when I say lightly, I mean lightly. The problem with honors is in mercenaries. If this is the currency that decides on quantity or quality, they shouldn't have quantity require two different purchases. So, if you buy more slots, then you don't have the mercenaries to fill those slots. But if you buy mercenaries, you don't have any room to deploy them. Also, it doesn't really make any sense that mercenaries are following you for your honor. They're mercenaries. They should be working for gold, like a mercenary. Instead, I would argue that you should be using your honor to instead be upgrading your valor. Late game, due to the annoyance of army building, I ended up only using 3 formations out of my 10 in the later part of the game to just dominate the final missions, because I was getting so sick and tired of army building. And now for the ugly currency, It's gold. Gold is standard gold in an RPG. It lets you buy things in town, equipment, consumables. What I really like is the fact that every town has a limited inventory of items, so they can sell out of really anything. And that there is no way of knowing what a town's inventory is before you free it. The problem is that even after you free a town, each one then has a completely separate inventory from each other. If you want to know what a free town sells, you either need to go to the town and open up the store, or you can open up the map and press X for facility info and scroll through a list, and that list won't let you see the stats of what they have, just the name of what they have. And with 114 towns in the game, this is incredibly tedious, especially if you weren't in the market for any particular item. It would be much, much easier if there was a unified town store for liberated regions, either for entire countries like Cornea, Drakenhold, Elheim, or just smaller sub-regions, like the Swamp region, or the region of Elheim with the human settlers, or Drakenhold Desert. And also, if mercenaries were hired with gold, then there actually is a quantity-quality balance. Do you want more sword swingers, or do you want better swords for them to swing? Now, how would I personally fix these UX issues? I would try to gray out characters who are already in a formation, and then move them either to the top or the bottom of the list so that they're not in the way. I would also make the default sort into class for characters and item ID for items, so that there's a more sensical list of everyone. And I think that I would always have unique units get a priority for these lists. Characters like Scarlet, Elaine, Chloe, Magellan, Jeremy, all of those non-mercs are always at the top of the menu so that they are always the first ones you see. Mercs at the bottom so you can look through them if you want. I would also have unequipped items stack in the item inventory so that you don't have to scroll past rows of identical unused support items to get to the bottom. By the end of the game, I had dozens, literally dozens of bronze bangles in my inventory that I had to scroll all the way past if I wanted to get to some very good items. I would also have a toggle to hide equipped items when you're equipping a character. Because you know what? I don't really need to see every single equipped hat that I've given my characters or all the shields that I can't use. I only want to see the shields that I can use right now. And of course, I would unattach the tactics optimization button from the item optimization button. The fact that those are linked is very not good. And also, improving the optimization AI on a whole would be better. No magic buffs for units that don't have a magic attack. But how is the game? Honestly, I think it's fantastic. I got 99 hours of game time personally, and I recommend it to any people who like tactics games or RPGs. The story is generic in a lot of ways. I mean, personally, I predicted every major plot beat by the end of the prologue. But that said, it's doing a wonderful job with that generic plot, with a lot of intrigue. There's an evil lord who's just trying to prevent a famine that you are causing, and several lords who are actively trying to quarantine plagues in their land, but you see them as tyranny because you're seeing people locked up in their homes unable to move. It's really interesting. I just wish that in the early game, characters talked more about mind control, or at least they tried to dispel it more often. Like if, when you beat Aubin, that Elaine tries to remove the mind control on him, but there's no mind control. So he stays the same. Have a little talk about how, oh, not everyone who works for Zenoira is mind controlled. And before you start saying that the mind control is too precious to use on most people, they did use it on Bruno. Bruno is not important. They got nothing by mind controlling him. They just mind control people sometimes. And even if that were true that they're precious and rare, Elaine has no way of knowing that. Now, what do I think I would want for a sequel to this game? Well, I would recommend that the game actually decrease the number of unique characters in your army. Just make each one feel more special and fleshed out. More rapport conversations and the like. More opportunities for them to chime in and pre-battle chatter. Because the game actually does a pretty good job about having pre-battle chatter include some units who you might not have recruited. Same thing with classes. Several classes could be cut out without missing anything. Like sword masters and lenchkinets filling out a very similar niche. And I would, tied into that, also disconnect race from class. It just feels very odd. Because you get 3 elven archers. And I don't know what you're even supposed to do with 3 elven archers. They're very specific counter units. If you remove more of the unique characters and remove some of the classes, it lowers the options in army building. But what it does is it makes the outcomes of your army building feel more impactful. Do you want your small number of very elite characters all in one unit where they can personally steamroll through an enemy straight to a point, but then leave all your other units very vulnerable? Or do you spread out your strong elite units? Make your formations more generic, but make a wider strength of your army. I would also have other races arrive earlier in the story. Beastrels and elves are apparently being taken as slaves and exported to the main country, but we never see them outside of their country, with one exception being a single Beastrel who's up in Albion. He gives you a side quest, actually, and it is the strangest side quest I think I've ever seen. It tells you to go back to a country and ask them if they have any support to give you. It just boggles the mind that they would hide this item and not give it to you if they're already working for you. I would also try not to have any forced godly unions or the marriage in the game, unless it is a canon pairing. I feel very sad thinking about the people who are ruining the lesbian angel's love life, or breaking up the gay bear and wolf. Before you say I'm reading too much into the bear and the wolf, they're literally naked together in a hot spring at the end. And I know this is a Japanese game, but come on, they're gay. Also, the quest menu gives you an alert for completed quests. I did the mission. You don't need to tell me to check the quest log to say that I did the mission. I did it. I know. Anyways, thanks for watching the video. Like, comment, subscribe, do all those normal things. I'm probably going to be making another video. Next one is going to be on a game. I think it might be a show report. I have some thoughts on Has Been Hotel, and I wish to curse the internet with its existence.